the unexpected smile. The sand beneath Marcus Vale's boots felt like walking on crushed dreams and poor life choices. He squinted up at the towering walls of the Crimson Nexus arena, where thousands of alien spectators chittered, roared, and made sounds that his translator couldn't even attempt to process. Somewhere in the crowd, a blob-like creature was placing bets against him with odds that would make a loan shark weep. "Ladies, gentlemen, and unidentifiable masses of sentient goo," boomed announcer Grimlock, his 7 tentacles gesticulating wildly from the central platform. "Today we witness the legend of Zephyr, the ethereal executioner against, He paused, clearly having forgotten Marcus's name entirely. "This human person," Marcus waved cheerfully at the crowd. "Thanks for the enthusiasm, Grim. Really feeling the love." The arena's atmospheric processors kicked in, flooding the combat, pit with a shimmering haze that made everything look like a fever dream. Marcus adjusted his grip on the plasma sword they'd given him, a weapon that hummed with the kind of energy that suggested it was either very dangerous or very broken. Possibly both. Then she appeared. Zephyr didn't walk onto the battlefield. She materialized from the shadows like nightmares given form. 7 feet of lethal grace, her translucent skin seemed to shift between silver and deep purple, and her 4 arms moved with mechanical precision. Her eyes, if they could be called eyes, were twin voids that seemed to absorb light itself. She wore no armor, needed none. Her entire body was a weapon honed across 1,000 battles. Marcus had seen her highlight reel. 37 consecutive victories, 0 survivors. She didn't just defeat opponents. She erased them from existence with the casual efficiency of someone deleting spam emails. "So," Marcus called out, bouncing slightly on his heels, "come here often? The decor's lovely, very apocalyptic chic." Zephyr tilted her head, a motion so slight it was barely perceptible. She didn't speak. Marcus had read that she never spoke to her prey. Why waste words on the already dead? The crowd fell silent. Even the betting pools stopped updating. This was it. The moment everyone had paid to see. The legendary warrior against the sacrificial human. Marcus grinned wider. "Just so you know, I've been practicing my death scream. Want me to run through it real quick, or should we save it for the dramatic finale?" Zephyr moved. 1 second she was 20 feet away. The next, Marcus was airborne, his ribs introducing themselves to the arena wall with a wet crunch. The crowd exploded in approval. Grimlock's tentacles writhed in excitement. Marcus slid down the wall, leaving a Marcus-shaped dent in the reinforced polymer. His vision swam. His chest felt like someone had tap-danced on it wearing boots made of regret, and he was pretty sure he could taste 3 different colors. He should have stayed down. Any rational person would have stayed down. The medical bay was starting to look very appealing. Instead, Marcus pushed himself to his feet, spat out something that might have been blood or might have been his dignity, and smiled. "Okay," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "So, that's your forehand. Very impressive. Tell me, do you give lessons? Because I could really use some pointers on my not dying horribly technique." Zephyr stopped. For the first time in recorded arena history, the ethereal executioner froze mid-strike. Her lower right arm, which had been drawing back for a finishing blow, simply hovered. The silence stretched like taffy. Somewhere in the crowd, a gelatinous being made a confused, warbling sound. "What?" Zephyr said, her voice like wind through a graveyard. "Are you doing?" Marcus blinked. She spoke. The woman who never spoke to her victims had just asked him a question. "Well," Marcus said, checking his ribs for new and interesting arrangements. "Currently, I'm bleeding in several places and questioning my life choices. But generally speaking, I'm trying not to die. How am I doing so far?" Zephyr's void eyes narrowed. "You should be afraid." "Should I?" Marcus tilted his head, mirroring her earlier gesture. because honestly, I'm more confused than terrified. Don't get me wrong, you hit like a freight train full of angry deities. But fear seems counterproductive right now. All beings fear death. Sure, but you know what I fear more than death? Marcus began circling slowly, and to his amazement, Zephyr turned to track him. Awkward small talk at dinner parties, stepping on someone's pet in the dark. That moment when you wave at someone who's actually waving at the person behind you. Something flickered across Zephyr's features. Not quite expression. Her kind didn't really do facial expressions, but a subtle shift in her bioluminescent patterns. "You mock me," she said. "Mock? No, no, no." Marcus held up a finger, nearly losing his balance. "I'm attempting to establish rapport, find common ground. We're both here, well, you're breathing, I'm wheezing, close enough." The arena's crowd was growing restless. They'd paid for a spectacle, not whatever this was. Someone threw what looked like popcorn, except it screamed when it hit the sand. Announcer Grimlock's voice boomed uncertainly. "Ladies and, what appears to be happening here is combat?" Marcus glanced up at the announcer's booth. "Sorry. Grim, we're having a moment. Cultural exchange and all that." Zephyr's second left arm twitched, the first uncontrolled movement Marcus had seen from her. "You are different." Different how? Devastatingly handsome, charmingly inadequate, surprisingly difficult to kill? Different because... Zephyr paused, her head tilting at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. "Because you smile." Marcus's grin widened. "Guilty as charged. It's a compulsion. Very embarrassing at funerals. Warriors do not smile when facing death." "Well, there's your problem right there," Marcus said, lowering his plasma sword until it pointed at the sand. "You've been fighting. Warriors. I'm more of a professional disappointment with delusions of adequacy." The arena's environmental systems flickered. Warning lights began flashing along the walls, a sign that the combat algorithms were detecting anomalous behavior. When fighters didn't fight, the arena's AI got nervous. Zephyr noticed the lights, too. Her stance shifted, not into an attack position, but into something that looked almost uncertain. "The systems expect blood," she said quietly. "Systems expect a lot of things," Marcus replied. "Doesn't mean we have to deliver, unless you're really attached to the whole 37 consecutive kills thing. I mean, I get it. Consistency is important in any career." For the first time since entering the arena, Zephyr looked directly at him. Not at his weapon, not at his stance, but at his face, at his smile. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why am I here? Why am I not dead? Why do I keep talking when clearly I should know better? Why do you smile when I could end you?" Marcus considered this, absently rubbing his bruised ribs. "You want the philosophical answer or the practical one?" "Both. Practically speaking, because being terrified hasn't kept anyone alive in this place. Philosophically," Marcus paused, meeting those void-like eyes. "Because you're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" "A monster. Instead, I got someone who's curious enough to ask questions." The crowd's restlessness was building into outright hostility. Food, or what passed for food among various species, began raining down into the arena. The warning lights flashed faster. Zephyr glanced at the growing chaos around them, then back at Marcus. "They want a show." "They always want a show," Marcus said. "Question is, what kind of show do we want to give them?" Something changed in Zephyr's posture. The mechanical precision softened just slightly. For the first time in 37 fights, she looked uncertain, and Marcus, bloodied and outmatched, smiled even wider. "So," he said, raising his sword but keeping it loose in his grip. "Want to dance? I should warn you, I have 2 left feet, and a tendency to trip over my own shadow." Zephyr raised her own blade. a weapon that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. But instead of striking, she began to circle, matching Marcus's slow, almost casual pace. Neither attacked, neither fled. They simply moved in their deadly orbit, two predators who had suddenly forgotten how to hunt, while above them the crimson Nexus Arena descended into confused chaos. The ethereal executioner had hesitated, and the human who made her do it couldn't stop smiling. The bond forged in combat. The holding cells beneath the Crimson Nexus Arena smelled like disappointment marinated in industrial disinfectant. Marcus sat on what generously could be called a bench, though it felt more like a slab designed by someone who'd heard about comfort but never experienced it personally. His ribs had progressed from screaming agony to dull, persistent reminder of poor life choices, which he considered progress. Across the narrow corridor, in an identical cell, Zephyr stood motionless. She hadn't moved in 3 hours. Marcus wasn't even sure she breathed. "So," he called out, his voice echoing off the polymer walls, "this is cozy. Very dystopian bed and breakfast vibe. 1 star, would not recommend to friends." Zephyr's head turned slightly, the first movement she'd made since the guards had shoved them into their respective cages. "You still speak," she observed. "It's a character flaw," Marcus admitted. "My mother used to say I'd talk the ears off a deaf mute. Then I pointed out that deaf mutes don't have working ears anyway, so it was a flawed metaphor, and she grounded me for being a smartass." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Zephyr's bioluminescent patterns. "Your mother sounds patient." She was a saint. Right up until she sold me to the Arena Corps to pay off her gambling debts. Marcus stretched, wincing, as his ribs protested. "But hey, family bonding comes in all forms, right?" Before Zephyr could respond, the lights in the corridor began flashing red. Emergency klaxons wailed, and a voice speaking in 17 different languages announced something that sounded both urgent and deeply unpleasant. "Well," Marcus said, getting to his feet, "that doesn't sound good." The cell doors hissed open simultaneously. Guard Captain Brutus, a 4-armed, 8-foot-tall nightmare wearing what looked like riot gear designed by someone with anger management issues, stomped into view. His translator collar crackled to life. "Prisoners Marcus Vale and Zephyr of the Void," he announced in a voice like grinding metal, "you have been selected for Corrective Combat Protocol 77 Alpha." Marcus raised his hand. "Quick question. Is that the one where we get gently scolded, or the one where something tries to eat our faces?" Brutus's 4 eyes narrowed in what Marcus hoped was confusion rather than hunger. "Face-eating is probable." "Fantastic. Just checking." Within minutes, they were being marched through corridors that grew progressively more ominous. The walls shifted from standard institutional gray to a deep crimson that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Bioluminescent veins ran along the ceiling, casting everything in an unsettling amber glow. "Arena Controller Vex is displeased," Brutus explained as they walked. "Your performance was anomalous. Crowds expect death. Sponsors expect blood. You provided conversation." "Terrible of us," Marcus agreed. "Next time we'll be sure to die more enthusiastically." Zephyr spoke for the first time since leaving the cells. "What is Protocol 77 Alpha?" Brutus's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Redemption through adversity. You face the Shadow Maw together. Victory earns freedom. Failure earns consumption. Together?" Marcus glanced at Zephyr. "As in, on the same team." "Survival partnerships are permitted under emergency protocols," Brutus confirmed, "though rarely successful." They arrived at a smaller arena, more intimate than the Grand Coliseum above, but somehow more terrifying. The walls were lined with energy dampeners that hummed with barely contained power. No crowd here, just observation windows high above, where shadowy figures watched like bored gods. In the center of the arena floor was a circular pit, currently sealed with a massive adamantine grate. "The Shadow Maw," Brutus announced with evident pride, "has consumed 43 previous combatants. It feeds on fear, grows stronger with each kill, and has never been defeated." "Naturally," Marcus muttered. "Wouldn't want this to be easy." 2. Guards tossed them weapons. Marcus received another plasma sword, while Zephyr was given what looked like a crystalline spear that bent light around itself. "You have until the Shadow Maw feeds," Brutus said, his forearms folding behind his back. "Begin whenever you're ready to die." The guards retreated to safe observation positions. Marcus and Zephyr stood alone in the arena, the sealed pit between them pulsing with something that definitely wasn't friendly. "So," Marcus said, testing his sword's weight, "any experience with shadow-based nightmare creatures?" "Some," Zephyr replied, her grip shifting on the light spear. "They typically respond poorly to humor." Marcus grinned. "Good thing I have a backup plan." "Which is?" "Run screaming and hope you can handle it." The grate began to rise with a grinding mechanical shriek. Something darker than darkness began seeping up from the pit, not climbing, but flowing like liquid night with too many teeth. The Shadow Maw emerged fully, and Marcus immediately regretted every decision that had led to this moment. It was roughly the size of a shuttlecraft, composed entirely of writhing shadow stuff that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. Dozens of eyes opened and closed along its surface like blinking. Stars and its mouth, because of course it had a mouth, unhinged to reveal rows of teeth that looked like crystallized screams. "Okay," Marcus said, backing toward Zephyr until they stood side by side. "New plan. The Shadow Maw lunged. Marcus dove left, Zephyr right. The creature's bulk crashed into the arena floor where they'd been standing, leaving a crater that smoked with otherworldly cold. "Zephyr!" Marcus shouted as he rolled to his feet. "I don't suppose your people have any traditional Shadow Maw hunting songs?" "Why would we have—" Zephyr began, then stopped as realization hit her. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" Marcus parried a shadow tentacle with his plasma sword, the contact sending sparks cascading around them. "Making conversation during combat." Zephyr's spear carved through the creature's flank, eliciting a roar that sounded like dying galaxies. "It is distracting." "Distracting for who? Me, you, or Mr. Friendly here?" The Shadow Maw paused its attack, multiple eyes focusing on Marcus with what looked like confusion. In that moment of hesitation, Zephyr struck again, her spear finding something vital in the creature's core. "It responds to uncertainty," she said, understanding dawning in her voice. "Everything responds to uncertainty," Marcus replied, dancing away from snapping jaws. "Uncertainty is the great equalizer, makes everyone second-guess themselves. Even apex predators? Especially apex predators. They're not used to prey that doesn't behave predictably." As if to prove his point, Marcus turned toward the Shadow Maw and called out, "Hey, Shadow Buddy! Quick question. Do you have a dental plan? Because those teeth could really use some professional attention." The creature actually recoiled, its form rippling with confusion. Zephyr moved with liquid grace, her spear finding another weak point. "Continue," she said. "Really? You want me to keep talking?" "Your voice makes it hesitate." Marcus grinned, even as he dodged another attack. "Finally, someone who appreciates my conversational skills. Okay, big guy," he addressed the Shadow Maw. "Let's discuss your career choices. Terrifying shadow monster is very dramatic, but have you considered customer service? You've got the intimidation factor down pat." The Shadow Maw's attacks became increasingly erratic. Where before it had moved with predatory purpose, now it seemed uncertain, almost confused. Zephyr began to understand Marcus's rhythm. When he spoke, she struck. When the creature focused on his voice, she found its blind spots. They weren't just fighting together. They were becoming synchronized. You know what your problem is? Marcus continued, deflecting a shadow claw with his sword. No social skills. When's the last time you had a real conversation? And roaring menacingly doesn't count. It is working, Zephyr said, driving her spear deep into the creature's side. Your chaos creates opportunity. Chaos is my specialty, Marcus agreed, though I prefer to call it tactical unpredictability. The shadow maw was weakening. Its form had lost coherence, shadows bleeding away like smoke. But it wasn't finished. With a sound like reality tearing, the creature split into 3 smaller versions of itself, each one circling them with renewed purpose. Okay, Marcus said. That's new. Multiple targets, Zephyr observed. We need coordination. Right. You take the angry one on the left, I'll handle the sullen one on the right, and we'll team up for the confused-looking one in the middle. How can you tell they have different emotions? Body language. See how Lefty keeps gnashing his teeth? Classic anger issues. Righty is all hunched over, definitely brooding. And Middle keeps tilting his head like he's trying to solve a puzzle. Zephyr looked at him for a long moment. You are either brilliant or completely insane. Why not both? They moved together with an efficiency that surprised them both. Marcus's unpredictable attacks and constant chatter kept the shadow creatures off balance, while Zephyr's precision strikes found their weak points with surgical accuracy. The left creature fell first, dissolving into harmless mist. The right one followed moments later. The middle one, the confused one, seemed to realize it was outmatched and began retreating toward the pit. Oh, no you don't, Marcus called after it. We were just getting to know each other. But it was Zephyr who delivered the final blow, her light spear piercing through the creature's core in a flash of brilliant energy. The Shadow Maw's scream echoed through dimensions as it collapsed into ordinary shadow and faded away. Silence fell over the arena. Marcus and Zephyr stood in the center of the chamber, both breathing hard, weapons still raised. Around them, the arena's systems began powering down with disappointed whirs and clicks. Well, Marcus said finally, that was educational. You fight like no warrior I have ever encountered, Zephyr said, lowering her spear. That's because I don't fight. I improvise. There's a difference. High above them, Arena Controller Vex's voice crackled through hidden speakers. Impressive. Unexpected, but impressive. You have earned your freedom, as promised. Marcus looked up at the observation windows. Just like that? No fine print? No. But first you must complete 17 additional trials of increasing deadliness? Your victory was unprecedented. The data will be valuable for future protocols. Glad we could help with the research, Marcus replied dryly. Guards arrived to escort them out. Different guards, these ones treating them with something approaching respect rather than contempt. As they walked back through the corridors, Marcus noticed Zephyr staying close beside him. So, he said, what's next for the famous ethereal executioner? Back to the killing circuit? Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. I am reconsidering my career path. Oh? What did you have in mind? Perhaps something that involves more conversation, Marcus grinned. I know a guy who might have some ideas about that. Do you? Yeah. Me. As they reached the arena's exit, actual daylight visible through the doorway for the first time in days, Zephyr turned to him. Marcus Vale, she said formally. Would you consider a partnership? What kind of partnership? The kind where we leave this place together and see what happens when two impossible things decide to be impossible somewhere else. Marcus looked at the alien warrior who had nearly killed him, who had instead become something like a friend, and whose bioluminescent patterns were currently displaying what he was learning to recognize as amusement. Zephyr, he said, I thought you'd never ask. They walked out of the Crimson Nexus arena together, two warriors who had found something better than victory. They had found understanding. Behind them, the arena's systems began analyzing their combat data, trying to quantify what had happened. But some things, like the moment when enemies become allies or when a smile changes everything, couldn't be reduced to algorithms. Some things were just impossible. And sometimes, impossible was exactly what the universe needed.